Hi friends, this is Molly Bahrain again from the Big Garden, and today's lesson 4 called Save the Pollinators. There's a lot of ways that this can happen. Common way is with animals such as birds, bees, bats, butterflies, moths, beetles, as well as humans. Or also, plants can be pollinated by wind. So plants that do not have showy flowers, like grassy plants for example, they have flowers but they're not showy, and that's because they're pollinated by wind. Plants that have really showy flowers are a telltale sign that they are pollinated by animals because they want to attract the pollinators to them. The honeybee, which is genus Apis, is one of the most well-known pollinator, and that's because they make honey. They form colonies, and many beekeepers will take care of those European honeybees. But also we have a native bee called a mason bee, and those are solitary bees that don't colonize like honeybees do. So what you can see here is this is a bee barn, and this is for your native mason bee. So this provides a shelter for them to lay their eggs and for their larvae to emerge and help pollinate your garden. So here in this center panel you can see there's these little tubes, and what will happen is the mason bee will create channels inside this tube and they'll lay their eggs in there. And it's a great shelter for the mason bees to reproduce. So if you want to attract more native bees to your garden, I encourage you to get something like this. To put this in your garden, it's recommended you have it about 5 to 7 feet off the ground. So if you want to put it on a garden fence post or a shed, something like that, then over the winter you want to put it in a space that is protected from the temperatures, but do not put it inside your home. So like if you have a garage or a garden shed, that would be a great place to have them over winter. And then when you bring it back out in the spring, they'll emerge, and then you can start all over that year again. What's the next pollinator that you can think of for your garden? It's probably the butterfly. It's one of the most beautiful pollinators that you can attract to your garden. Butterflies like flowers that have a narrow tube with a wide landing pad for them to land on as they eat the nectar from the flowers. Beetles are a very common pollinator in your garden. There's over 30,000 species of beetles found in the United States, and many of them are pollinators. Unfortunately, they have a bad reputation because they will eat your vegetables and your plants, and so a lot of folks don't like beetles in your garden, but they do pollinate. Beetle pollinated plants tend to have large, strong scented flowers. One of the common flowers that they will pollinate is a magnolia, pawpaws, and yellow pond lilies. Butterflies and moths like a nice, pleasant, sweet odor. Beetles don't necessarily need that. It may be hard to imagine that flies are a pollinator in your garden, but they are. And the fact that flies are general pollinators should encourage all of us to leave the flies alone and let them do their job as pollinators. So plants pollinated by flies include the American pawpaw tree, the dead horse arum, the skunk cabbage, goldenrod, and members of the carrot family like Queen Anne's lace. Hummingbirds are the most common bird that will pollinate your flowers in North America. They have long beaks and tongues that allow nectar to go deep into those tubular flowers. Pollen is carried on their beaks and feathers to different flowers. And the regions closer to the tropics that have warmer climates tend to be even more commonly pollinated by hummingbirds. You need food, you need water, and you need shelter. So let's first talk about what food they will need. So flowers will provide nectar, which nectar is high in sugar and contains amino acids that these insects need. And then also, if you have fermented fruits, that will provide food for bees, beetles, and butterflies. If a pollinator can visit the same type of flower over and over again, it doesn't have to relearn how to enter the flower. So plant in groups to increase pollinator efficiency. Plant a diversity of plants to support a variety of pollinators. Flowers of different colors, fragrances, and season of blooms and also in different heights, will attract different pollinator species to your garden and provide pollen and nectar throughout the season. So now that we've talked about food that you can provide for pollinators, let's talk about shelter. So earlier I talked about the bee barn for mason bees, but there's also other things that you can do to provide shelter for pollinators. One thing is you can incorporate different canopies in your landscape and different size shrubs, trees, and perennials to provide shelter and shade for these pollinators. Leave some area of soil uncovered to provide ground nestings for insects that have easy access to underground tunnels. And include plants that are needed by butterflies for their larval development. So the monarch butterfly needs milkweed, and the larvae will eat the milkweed. And so not only think about the adult stage of your pollinators, but also think about the larval stage and what their host plants that they need to survive. So the last element to attract pollinators to your garden space is having some element of water. A clean, reliable source of water is essential for pollinators. So having running water, pools, ponds, waterfalls, fountains, or small containers of water just to provide a drinking space and bathing opportunities for pollinators. One in 3 of every bites of food we eat is possible because of bees and other pollinators. So while other bee species like bumblebees are important for crop pollination, the honeybee is the most important commercial pollinator. Honeybees pollinate the plants that produce 1/4 of the food consumed by Americans. So first, I encourage you to pay attention to what pesticides and herbicides you are applying to your garden space, because all of those affect the health of your pollinators. So spray when bees aren't active, so just after dawn, and choose targeted ingredients. Also, when you spray, make sure you're not doing a broad spray and you're just targeting individual plants and avoiding those plants that have active bee and fly and wasp pollinators. Minimize tillage to protect ground nesting pollinators. Ensure your water sources are scattered throughout your landscape. Choose a variety of native plants that act as windbreakers and field borders throughout your farm or landscape. So I hope this was helpful and that now you're inspired to plant some more pollinators around your garden. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.